For all the praise SAO Alternative has received for finally showing off what could be done with the world of the series if it was put in the hands of another writer, it can't escape those restraints entirely, and is weighed down in many places by the illogical brokenness of the world Kawahara first constructed. The reason Len plays Gun Gale Online at all is a result of the nonsensical stipulation that your character model is randomly assigned to you without any ability to meaningfully control that, and also without any ability to even re-roll that character on your profile. This forces you to create a bunch of profiles until you get a good character, or just go find a different game entirely if for one reason or another you're unhappy with how you randomly turn out. As we see in the show itself, she leaves the game she purchased and was intending to play entirely because of this absurdity, and she would not be the only person to do so. It almost breaks the world on its own, asking you to believe that a design team would somehow restrict the player in that way, and always was a transparent ploy to give Kirito a femme design without undermining this unyielding hunk's masculinity by suggesting he'd ever go with such an aesthetic by choice. And this series only exacerbates those plot holes further. As was pretty easy to guess, but at least never really explicitly shown in the original Gun Gale Online, there is a notable gameplay advantage rendered to you by getting given certain character models. In episode 1, a team points this out themselves when one of them shouts, "She's too small," as she hides behind a body and is able to keep herself entirely out of the line of fire by doing so because of the fact that she's so small. The same applies to the start of that firefight, where she hid in a suitcase that she could not have used if she wasn't so tiny. I mean, these are some of the very most basic fundamental game design considerations. When Call of Duty first allowed you to play as a woman back in 2013's COD Ghosts, there was a bunch of talk early on about if because women tend to be smaller, these female character models would have smaller hitboxes, and thus necessitate playing as a girl to be as competitive as possible. And, you know, as much as I actually love that idea, they went with the much more logical move of just making the models about the same size, and packing the female character model with a bit extra gear to fill her out and make sure that model matched the hitbox, which was identical to the male character models. Are these randomized character models in SAO randomized around the average respective heights for men and women? And if so, would being a woman give you a better chance of getting a smaller character, thus granting female players as a group an almost inherent competitive advantage? Again, big fan of that idea personally, but you can't say that it makes any sense as an actual element of the game. Let's see a multiplayer shooter try to work affirmative action into its base mechanics and watch how well that goes over with the gamer crowd. Whatever the case, even if that was the intent on the developers' parts, it certainly didn't work out, as the game's female player base is extremely low, so really just a failure on all fronts there. And none of that matters at all. You see, SAO Alternative is a brilliant test case for and example of how plot holes in and of themselves matter little, and how they've got to be understood with much more nuance for them to be at all effective as a point of critique. It may seem obvious to some, but it's a misconception so widely prevalent that it warrants addressing. Pointing out plot holes does not in and of itself do much of anything to prove for you that an anime is bad. To explain why this is, let's look at why SAO Alternative is good, so we'll be able to see how anime with these issues can avoid being defined by them. The foundation for this series is its protagonist, Karen. She's just a solid character who really capitalizes on the thematic material inherent in SAO's premise, utilizing the virtual world to free herself from her insecurities about her body and find a life for herself that is much more meaningful than what she could find in the real world. She's able to make friends in GGO based upon a mutual respect for each other's tenacity and ability, and then move those online connections into the real world as well. She was so far removed from having the confidence to form those relationships before she got online, and without virtual reality likely would have continued her socially isolated lifestyle that would only get the occasional reprieve when her old friend Shinohara was in town. As her character elegantly demonstrates, the online world offers a great opportunity to interact with people free from much of the baggage that you'd have to try to deal with if you were doing so physically. And in giving you that opportunity, it can help you start to sort through your baggage, come to terms with it, and cast aside some of the stuff in there that was weighing you down. Best of all, we need very minimal explanation of all this to just innately grasp all of what's being said here, because of how well crafted it is. And so yeah, are some of the systems surrounding all this kind of bullshit? for sure, but none of that meaningfully distracts from or undermines these ideas. The fact that some of the tech seems a tad fucky in places, or that some of the game design choices are a bit bizarre, is a technical flaw, and I would not say that you're wrong for pointing them out as such, but like any technical shortcoming, they've got to be examined within the broader context of the series. These just aren't the kind of issues that are so severe that they'd ruin my badass lesbians hanging out.
If the tips touch, it's gay, my friends.
Or ruin my sultry, sweet-talking badass spy girl for me. You can't exactly call Keiichi, Japan did nothing wrong, Sigsawa good on politics, but he, unlike some certain other SAO writers, is, if nothing else, a friend of the gays in his series. Seriously, can someone please tell me how in the 2000s Reki Kawahara was possibly able to kill off a gay character with what is canonically super AIDS? He must actually be the greatest writer of all time, because how did he get away with that? That said, I'm certain that his actual politics are much better than Sigsawa's. Just, literally, how did that happen? I honestly can't understand. SAO Alternative delivers cute girls engaging in exciting gunfights that usually have a solid amount of tactical depth to them.
This is America. Don't catch you slipping now. Don't catch you slipping now. Look what I'm whipping now.
It's got an interesting protagonist whose personal hang-ups allow the series to really capitalize on its premise, exploring the ways that the internet can affect a positive change in people's lives. And none of this great stuff is negatively impacted in a major way by some details that technically don't make sense. There's definitely instances where the thing that's broken is so core to what's happening with the series, or the ideas it's trying to convey, that it does legitimately hurt it, and you can certainly argue that this is the case for the mainline SAO series. However, the takeaway a good number of people seem to have had from videos making that argument, or just given pieces of internet critique in general, is that it's those plot holes that are the root issue, and not the wider impact they have. I think that trying to be more conscious of the appeal in a show, of its good elements, and what can make it enjoyable, and then thinking through how a given aspect may undermine that enjoyment is a much better way to make sure that our criticism carries more meaning than simple, unnuanced, epic owns of the piece of media in question. Perhaps the seeming explanations for Pito's and M-san's actions being that they're just crazy hurts the series. It's leaned upon as a way of explaining why certain plot points end up happening, and so takes some of the stakes out of them by making the whole reason they're happening in the first place seem kind of arbitrary and unsubstantiated. This kind of media criticism that focuses not on the flaw but on the harmful impact of that flaw is ultimately more meaningful and informative for your audience, and, I think, serves as a much better alternative. There is, however, no acceptable alternative to going and checking out the nearly 2.5-hour epic just put out on Kunihiko Ikuhara by my very good friend Zeria. The culmination of over a year of work, this beats out Digi for the longest fully scripted and edited anime analysis video on the website, and is something I'm extremely excited for and impressed by. Absolutely toss some well-deserved love her way. And while you're at it, check out the Trans Culture Club podcast that both of us are a part of, linked in the description. The feeling bad about not putting in enough work that video caused was a decent part of motivating me to really get myself going and producing more content this month, and I hope to continue that. If you'd like to help in those efforts by joining Psyker, Carkeys, Mathwiz97, Jonathan Conley, Skylar Morrow, Tyler Monk, Sakamoto Mio, Teen Show 37, Josh Grant, Rika Fag, Lord Liquid Bacon III, Stella Luna, Joaquim Altfelt, Darian De Sotel, David McCown, Kieran Rice, Hijort Dog, Matt Bekelder, Smokeweed Sephiroth 420, J-Man 4747, and everyone else supporting me on Patreon. That would be immensely appreciated, as that really does help so much. Thanks, everyone.